Hi, my name's Keith Cooper from Northlight Images. In this video I'm doing a short review of a macro lens from TTArtisan. This is a 100mm f2.8. It's available in a wide range of mounts. Now, if this sounds familiar, it's because I was originally asked last year, and I got a video about it, I put a link to have a look at this. This is the tilt shift version of the 102.8. Many features of it the same. I can't see much difference between it, but the version you can buy now does not have the tilt shift option. Now this is an RF mount lens, and that means there's quite a bit of space. The version I'm actually testing here is, and this is attached on a GFX100, is an EF mount version. Now EF mount, that's full frame Canon. It's available in lots of other mounts as well, but effectively this lens, because it's EF mount, and because the EF mount is quite large, I can use an adapter and I can see what the GFX or medium format version will look like. Now, there are a few issues and a few caveats and gotchas with the lens, but it's relatively cheap. And I saw someone ask the other day, what does it mean, a cheaper lens? Well, it means you've paid less for the lens. Doesn't necessarily make it better or worse than paying for a more expensive lens. Mind you, that said, I've got with the GFX here some pretty expensive lenses, and they do show the difference for the job that they do. This is always what it comes down to is how good is this lens for macro use? Now, as I say, I've got the EF mount version. I'm cheating a little bit by using an adapter, but because of the size of the mount, the performance you're getting here is pretty much what you would get with the native G mount version of it. I've got it set up. This is my macro stand. I did a video about this a while ago, looking at creating this specially. It's actually, I'm not going to tip it up because it'll tip over, but this section is hinged, so I can change the angle and I can put the subject down here. Now, I'm using this, and as you can see in the back, if I put my hand in it, this is connected up with Fuji's latest tethering software, which works very well. And it makes a change because previously I couldn't use it with this stack shot unit. Now this is a motorized rail. I use this for creating stacks of things for macro photography. I do macro photography as part of our work. It tends to be technical things like this, which means that apart from a few tests and things I'll show you, I don't do any of the staples of insects, fungi, flowers, whatever. I just don't do any of that sort of macro photography, which means that I know sometimes people dismiss it out of hand because they spend ages photographing insects, multiple stacks and things. Yep, a lot of skill. I just have no interest in the subject at all. And for me, unless I'm being paid to do it, I need to have an interest. Now I do have an interest in the technical side of this, but depends on the subject. Now this, what you can see in the back here, this is an old memory module from an old laptop. I use it for testing macro lenses because it has specular highlights, it has very fine detail, and it has depth as well, so you can look at depth of field. So the components, the depth of field when you're focused close up on this is so thin that's actually a difficulty with it. Now with the GFX here, I can use, by setting the mount adapter focal length to 100mm, I can use handheld, I can use the image stabilization. Would I find it better to use a proper macro lens with lens stabilization and body? Yes, but you're going to pay a lot more for that. So it's really what you want to pay for. And yeah, it does what it does pretty well. In terms of technical quality, let's have a quick flick through some test images. Now, I've got these two monitors attached to this MacBook Pro, which means that I can easily lose track of where the pointer is. But we've got showing on this one, that's a tethering app. The software you can see here is an older version of Helicon Remote or Helicon Capture. This is the Helicon Remote, and this is controlling the stack shot. So I can actually use this to control the stack shot, use the shutter release, plug the shutter release into this, and so I can use these two bits of software together. It's not quite as easy if I'm doing it on my old 5DS, but yeah, I've got 100 megapixels to play with. So let's have a quick look at what I've got. I'll just flip through some images here and I'll cut them into the video, and just so you can see an idea using it as a normal close-ish lens. This is just a picture of a cactus in the conservatory, and I've stepped through the apertures. So you can see as I step through it from F2.8, you can see the outer focus, we get a bit of detail in the background, bit more, and so on, up to F22. Now at F22, close focus here, the background is not that sharp. Yes, I know people will say, oh, F22, you can't use F22, think of the diffraction. Yeah, I do think of the diffraction, then I ignore it. Depends what I want the photo for. Diffraction is not that important a thing. It is something you need to take care of sometimes. Now, does make a difference when you're using magnification like this, and I'll come back to that because I'm also going to have a very quick look in comparison with the Canon MP-E65. Now the MP-E65 I've used for years. It's a 1:5 macro. Now it's a specialist macro lens, Canon EF mount. It has no focusing. So it's literally, you only adjust things, you set your magnification, and then you move the camera to focus. This, however, can be used as a normal 100mm lens. And quality-wise, it's not bad. But I will have a few issues to have a look there. Now, if I look at the actual construction of the lens, and I can look inside the RF mount version here as well, I can see that the internals move. It has a fixed lens at the front. You can see when you increase the magnification, the center, the middle of the lens moves forward. Interestingly enough, the rear of the lens moves as well, and there is it doesn't move in a linear moment, so it dips in and then dips out. So it's quite a complex design. It has quite a bit of extra exotic glasses in it, so it works very well. In terms of aberrations, well, vignetting is the main issue you're likely to come across, but at F2.8 it's not at all bad. I've seen worse, I've seen better, but the depth of field is so thin if you're close up. Now, vignetting, that's going to be the real issue on it. So I'm going to come back and show some examples of that. But looking at the MTF charts, now reading these MTF charts, you always have to take them with a big pinch of salt because there's no standardized way of creating them. They're as often produced as part of the marketing collateral for a lens as anything else, and they are optimistic sometimes. But you can look at them and get some ideas. And I notice in this that all the lines are fairly straight, running out from the top, out until we get to about 16mm. Now that's 16mm. Now that tells me that on full frame, this lens is going to be pretty good right across the frame. And it is. Now I can quickly compare that actually on, if I use the, change the ratio here. If I set 35mm crop mode, I've set the camera to 35mm crop mode, so I'm just using a 35mm crop area. There's still 60 odd megapixels. All the aberrations, it's sharp right to the edge, it's superb. Similarly, I put this, I'm not going to swap them over, but I put this on my 5DS and it works very well. There are no issues at all. I would expect issues looking at this when you go to the full-size sensor of this, which is 33 by 44mm rather than 24 by 36mm. The extra coverage of the medium format covers areas of the lens where it's not necessarily so great. Now that's with 35mm crop mode. We'll just put that back on, go back to full frame. Now, because I'm doing this at 2 magnification, I can see the vignetting that I mentioned. Now, the problem with the vignetting is this is at, let's have a look, this is at 2.8. The vignetting here, you always get vignetting on a lens. It's part of how lenses work. You'll get some vignetting. It's one of the compromises you make when designing lenses. But if I take this from 2.8 the vignetting normally will get less. So if you stop your lens down to 5.6 f8, you'll get much less vignetting if you see it. Whereas here, the vignetting is getting sharper. Now it's also getting darker because I haven't got auto exposure enabled on this. But if I take it right the way up to f22, I can see a hard vignette at the corners. Now, I checked this at different focal lengths, and you know, on the TTArtisan lens info, they do say that on medium format it vignettes at 2x magnification. Now, if I switch this to 1x magnification, and by the way, the working distance here is about 85mm here, so the working distance is quite good, certainly better than it is on the MP-E65. But working distance fairly good on this. If you want a longer working distance, get yourself a longer lens. Comes with some caveats, but in general the distance here is quite nice. As you can see, it's live view on it there. So in terms of the vignetting, this drops off as you reduce the magnification. Remember, this is on the medium format sensor. You don't see this vignetting if you're using it on a 35mm sensor or even a crop sensor. So anyway, this one here, if I take this to 1x magnification, so life size, then the vignetting's pretty much effectively gone. You get the normal lens vignetting. So that's great. What's not to like? Yeah, if you really want the medium format, you'll pay a lot to get a medium format macro lens that does this sort of magnification. Incidentally, if I switch the aspect ratio for this from, I did a 35mm crop earlier, which is great because it allows me to use some of my old lenses, still at 60 megapixels, so very good for that, but I've done lots of stuff on using other lenses. If I set this to a square crop, it gets rid of the corners completely. Because takes from what is 4:3 ratio, takes it to 1:1 ratio, and those pesky corners that cause the problems with it, they're gone. So if you want square medium format macro, works nicely. Now, what about if I focus at longer distances? Well, it turns out that certainly on medium format here, you get introduction of more vignetting, of a hard vignetting at infinity. So if you use the lens on medium format at infinity, 10-20 meters away, distant stuff, use it as a 100mm lens, you will find that if you take your aperture up to 11, you start to notice it. Take it up to 16 or 22, and there is hard vignetting quite noticeable in the corners, but there's a vignetting on it. Now, I don't know whether that is something that you get on the medium format version of the lens. My suspicion in looking at it is that you will get a little bit of it because it's related to the actual lens design. I didn't see it obviously when I was testing this one. This is the, let's say the tilt shift version, which is jolly nice, but remember, tilt shift or tilt for moving the plane of focus doesn't work very well at close distances, and the reason for that is effectively to get the amount of tilt of the plane of focus that you want, you need to move the lens far more than it's physically capable of. So if you want close up and using tilt, you end up using something like this, specialist system, and then the lenses tend not to be very good when they're tilted a lot. So effectively I can see why this wasn't kept as a macro tilt shift. It's a 100mm tilt shift, works very well. I've tested it on the EOS RP and it works great, but that's RF mount, so I can't use it on this or the EOS 5DS. Which is one that I do use quite a bit in my macro, particularly because I can control it fully from using Helicon stack. Now, I've got some reviews of Helicon stuff. I'll put some links to it. I've got 3 very detailed written reviews of different aspects of focus stacking and things like that, which might be of interest, but I'll not go into that here. Incidentally, the light I'm using here is the Inky Gold Crow lamp. This lamp is it's chargeable. It's got lithium batteries in it, and it is adjustable. I can set the color temperature, all sorts of. This is really useful for stuff like this, I find. Sometimes I will use flash. Incidentally, if I did want to use flash, there are some cold shoe mounting points on the front of the lens, which is quite useful. So if you're outdoors and you just want to put a lightweight flash on the front of your camera, that's actually useful rather than having it back here and connected with leads. Remember, it's a cold shoe, so it depends on your flash how you're going to actually use things. General performance of the lens. In terms of contrast and sharpness, it's on a par with the MP-E65 when used as a macro lens. It's sharp over most of the field. The MTF chart tells you it's going to fall off in the corners, particularly on medium format. I don't think it's a lens you'd use for that. Incidentally, with the adapter focal length set, the image stabilization on this works perfectly well with it. You've just got sensor-based image stabilization, but it works very well. So what's the image quality like? It's not bad. Would I use it? Yes. One area, it has less noticeable chromatic aberration than the MP-E65. Now, that's an old lens, but it was a very specialised lens, still is. Another one that Canon haven't got round to bringing out an RF mount version. Maybe they will one day. Yeah, they seem, that and tilt shifts, they don't seem to want to do it. If you want them, use the old EF mount versions. But anyway, in terms of overall image quality, it's on a par with the MP-E65. Chromatic aberration is better. I find out of focus highlights look better on this one because it has a simple 6-blade aperture on the MP-E, which can give a sharpness to out of focus areas. Now, I've got some examples here, and I'll just flip through them with some pictures just taken out in the garden. That bit I mentioned about the depth of field being very... The spider's web taken at F2.8 took several attempts to get this, and even so, you can see just there's only a few areas which are absolutely critically sharp with the full sensor there. There's no obvious colour to the lens. I didn't find any problems in adjusting the images. Backlighting, you can see the out of focus areas. It's quite nice here. This is around about half size, not so not 1-to-1, but of a small flower in the garden, backlit on it. But I got some out of focus highlights. You get a nice feel for what the lens looks like there. Closer view of a flower. You can see the background is a bit swirly on occasions, but it's, if you don't like the background, move slightly or change your lighting. It seems to work very well. But as I say, this was about 5.6 to try and get a little bit more depth of field. But you'll always remember with a 100mm lens like this, you're never going to have much, certainly when you're working close, never going to have much depth of field. Backlit views, this is on a honeysuckle in the garden with the sun backlighting. And you can see some detail of a hoverfly on one of the flowers there. I just took lots of shots with this because you're not got image stabilization, because basically where I wasn't convenient to set up a tripod or anything fancy like that. You're a bit at the, it's a bit of a lottery whether things work. Close up, some nice bit sunlight shining through the bush, some nice out of focus bits there. That is at f4, I believe. And it works. Looks okay. Direct sun coming through, a whole gap in the bushes there. Yes, you can see some flare. You can see. I haven't met a lens yet that would perform optimally in a situation like this. There's a bit of veiling and everything, but you'd expect. I'm looking through a dark bush. And there's a bit of direct sun coming through. So the fact that I've got it that good is better than many a lens I've seen. Now, I've been trying quite a few experiments and things with this just to see how well it worked. And as I say, I did also try out the MP-E65 on it. And you can see the smaller working distance. You can see the lighting there and that. Works very easily. In fact, as I said, I was able to by using the stack shot here to directly fire the shutter of this whilst controlling the stepper here, I was able to create a stacked picture of this particular memory module here and run it through. One of the output features you can use on Helicon Focus is an animation, and yeah, it's one of those things, looks pretty enough. Don't know when I'd actually use it, but you know, it's one of those bits that shows up nicely. So how good a lens? Well, it's a fine lens. Yeah, if you want to use it on medium format, you're going to have limitations, but you're getting a relatively cheap 100mm lens for it that works fine. I deliberately got the EF mount version here because I know that I could use it on the 5DS as well, and I'm not limited. EF mount, if you had the F mount version, so you wanted to use it on an older Nikon camera, the throat on the F mount is quite a bit smaller, so the vignetting problems you see here would be noticeably worse on F mount if you were trying to adapt it to use it with medium format. You could use this lens, it would work fine on something like Hasselblad X1D, X2D with a suitable adapter, because it's a fully manual lens, so you actually manually set the aperture. Half stops, it's about a 100-degree focus throw, so just over. So it's okay, it's not a particularly fine focus throw on it, but yeah, I keep coming back to the fact that, yeah, this is a lens that is cheap enough to buy to experiment with. It's cheap enough to give you good performance, that you will get good results. If you get seriously into macro stuff, then sure, you can spend lots more money on your kit and various settings. This stack shot rail, but this is because the reason I've got this is because I do some macro work commercially, and say typically components and things like this. But how good is it? Yeah, it's not at all bad. Would I buy one for this? Because I should say that yeah, I was sent this one to look at. So I have only, if I'm sent something, I won't actually say it's better than something else. All I'll say is that yeah, for a macro lens for this one is one that I will keep. Yeah, because it is useful. Now, if you've got any questions, let me know. I put lots of links in the notes to related articles and videos that I've done that look at this topic. But if you want to find out the detailed, you know, technical analysis of the lens, I'm afraid you're going to have to look for a review elsewhere. I do not have the equipment or the patience to do detailed lens reviews, and also when people do detailed lens reviews and start quoting numbers and things at you about lens performance, ask how many copies of the lens they tested and did they actually sort of average the results, because I've enough experience over the years of looking at lenses to know that there is variation in lenses. Now, I would expect, and I don't have evidence to base this up, that there is more variation in cheap lenses than there is in more expensive lenses. One of the reasons you pay more for lenses, but it works nicely. So yeah, if you're considering something and you want a macro, you don't want to run to the expense of getting a specialized macro lens for the system that you're using, worth trying. Run this on M43 or crop sensor, and you have just the center area there and it will look great. I'm only really stretching it a bit here by trying to use it on medium format. You know, cheating a little bit, I suppose. But anyway, I hope that was of some interest. Thanks for watching. And for those who've stuck through it, the Canon Pro 1100 that Canon was sending me has turned up. It's in a box downstairs. I wanted to get this out of the way before opening it up, so next video should be something connected with the Canon Pro 1100. Thanks and bye.